He chose the most crowded moment of our quarterly party to humiliate me. Raising his glass, he looked right at me and said, "I have fallen in love with someone else." My phone buzzed immediately with a notification that my administrative access was revoked. He was not just leaving our marriage, he was stealing the company I built from zero. If he wants a war, I will choose the battlefield and the ending. My name is Josephine Hernandez, and I built my life on the foundation of calculated risks and absolute control. I believed that if you worked harder than anyone else, if you built the structure strong enough, nothing could knock it down. I was wrong. The collapse did not happen with a tremor or a warning crack in the foundation. It happened all at once, amidst the clinking of crystal glasses and the hum of polite conversation. It was 7:30 in the evening, the peak of our quarterly success party. The ballroom of the hotel was bathed in amber light, designed to make everyone look successful and happy. I stood near the center of the room, wearing a dress that cost $2,000, a garment I had bought specifically to match the tie my husband, Evan Caldwell, was wearing. We were the power couple of Northline Meridian Consulting. We were the dream team, or so I thought. Evan tapped his spoon against his champagne flute. The sharp sound cut through the murmur of 200 guests. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. He looked handsome, standing there in the spotlight, his jawline sharp, his smile practiced. I smiled too, raising my glass slightly, expecting a toast to our record-breaking quarter. We had just secured a contract worth $5 million. This was supposed to be our victory lap. "Thank you all for coming," Evan said, his voice smooth, projecting the perfect blend of authority and warmth. "Tonight is about transitions. It is about recognizing when a chapter has ended." My smile faltered. That was not the speech we had rehearsed in the car. He turned his head. He looked straight at me. His eyes were not warm. They were dead. They were the eyes of a man reading a financial report about a failing asset. "Josephine and I have decided to separate," he announced. The air left the room. The silence that followed was not respectful. It was suffocating. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fingers gripping the stem of my glass so hard I thought it might snap. He was doing this here, now, in front of our employees, our investors, our competitors. He did not stop. "It has been a difficult time," he continued, his voice taking on a tone of somber regret that I knew was entirely manufactured. "Josephine has been struggling with the pressures of her position. For her own well-being, and for the stability of this company, she will be stepping back from her leadership role effective immediately to focus on her health." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. It was a lie. A perfectly constructed, public lie, designed to paint me as unstable, weak, and incapable. Before I could process the humiliation, my phone buzzed in my clutch. Then it buzzed again, and again, a relentless vibration against my palm. I looked down, my movements mechanical. The screen lit up with a notification from our internal server. "System alert, administrator access revoked. User Hernandez. Status disabled. Reason Executive Directive 001. I looked up at Evan. He was not looking at me anymore. He was looking at the crowd, playing the part of the strong leader making a tough sacrifice. This was not an impulsive breakup. This was an ambush. He had timed the revocation of my digital keys to the exact second of his announcement. He was not just leaving our marriage, he was stealing the company I had built from zero. My gaze drifted to the right, drawn by a flash of red silk. Marissa Vale. She was standing near the edge of the stage, holding a glass of wine. Marissa, whom I had hired 3 years ago because she was good with numbers. Marissa, who always called me sister and asked for advice on her dating life. She was not looking at Evan. She was looking at me. She did not look sympathetic. She did not look shocked. She smiled. It was a small, tight smile, barely visible. But the triumph in her eyes was screaming. She raised her glass slightly in my direction. A mockery of a toast. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. They were together. They had planned this. Every late night Evan had spent at the office. Every business trip, Every budget meeting I had been excluded from it all made sense. I could feel the eyes of the room on me. Pity, confusion, judgment. They were waiting for the breakdown. They were waiting for the hysterical wife to scream, to throw her drink, to prove Evan right. She is unstable. She needs to step back. I would not give them that satisfaction. I turned on my heel, my movement precise, and walked toward the double doors leading to the lobby. I kept my chin up. I did not run. I walked with the same steady cadence I used when entering a boardroom. As soon as the heavy doors closed behind me, cutting off the murmur of the crowd, I sprinted for the ladies' room. I pushed into the handicap stall and locked the door. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the closed toilet lid. My breath was coming in short, ragged gasps. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pressed my hands over my mouth to stifle a sob. He took it. He took the company. He took my reputation. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unclasp my clutch. I needed air. I felt like the walls were closing in. I had built Northline Meridian Consulting on my dining table. I had written the code for our first proprietary algorithm while Evan was asleep on the couch. I had secured our first 10 clients while he was still nervous about cold calling, and now he was standing out there, erasing me. I stood up and moved to the sinks. I gripped the cold porcelain, staring at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, but my makeup was intact. My eyes were wide, terrified. "Stop it," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, harsh. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run ice cold. I ran my wrists under the stream, counting backward from 10. 10. He wants you to break. 9. Marissa wants you to make a scene. 8. If you cry, you lose. 7. If you scream, you confirm his narrative. 6. You are Josephine Hernandez. 5. You are the architect of that company. 4. He is just the face. You are the brain. 3. Tears are for later. 2. War is for now. 1. I shut off the water. I grabbed a paper towel and dabbed my wrists dry. I looked back at the mirror. The terror was still there, deep down, but I had shoved it behind a wall of cold rage. I will not cry here, I said to my reflection, not in a public bathroom, not for him. I straightened my dress. I fixed a stray lock of hair. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, a shade darker than before. It was armor. I walked back out into the hallway and pushed open the doors to the ballroom. The room was quieter now, the buzz of conversation tentative. When I appeared, heads turned. Evan was still near the front, speaking to a group of investors. Marissa was at his elbow. When they saw me, Evan froze. He braced himself. I saw his shoulders tense. He was ready for the shout, for the tears. I walked straight up to the group. I did not look at Marissa. I looked at Evan. I did not frown. I smiled. It was the smile I used when I was negotiating a deal I knew I would win, even if the other party did not know it yet. "Evan," I said, my voice steady and clear enough for the surrounding circle to hear. That was a very dramatic announcement. You always did have a flair for the theatrical. I turned to the investors, men I had known for 5 years. "Gentlemen, do not let Evan's concern for my well-being worry you. The company is in excellent shape, thanks to the hard work of our team. In fact, the quarterly numbers are the highest they have ever been. Let us focus on celebrating that tonight. Personal matters can be discussed in the boardroom, not the ballroom." I raised my glass. To Northline Meridian, the investors, looking relieved to avoid a domestic scene, raised their glasses. To Northline Meridian. They murmured. Evan stared at me. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. Confusion flickered across his face. This was not the script. I was supposed to be the victim. I was supposed to be the crazy ex-wife. By refusing to play the part, I had just made him look like the one who brought personal drama into a professional setting. "Enjoy the evening," I said softly. I turned and walked away, my back straight, feeling his gaze burning into me. I kept walking until I reached the valet stand. I waited for my car. my entire body humming with adrenaline. When the valet brought my sedan around, I tipped him $20 and slid into the driver's seat. Only when the door was closed did I allow myself to exhale. The drive to Stonebridge Ridge usually took 40 minutes. I made it in 30. The suburbs were quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows on the manicured lawns. This was the neighborhood we had dreamed of when we were eating instant noodles in a one-bedroom apartment. We had bought the white timber house on the corner 2 years ago. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. That was strange. Evan usually left the porch light on. I walked up the steps, my keys in my hand. I inserted the key into the lock and turned. It did not move. I frowned and tried again. I jiggled it. Nothing. The key did not fit. I stepped back and looked at the door. The hardware was new. The brass was shiny, unweathered. He had changed the locks. He had announced the separation at 8 o'clock. It was now 9:15. He had someone here, ready to change the locks the moment he gave the signal. I walked around to the back, to the kitchen door. Locked. I tried the code on the smart lock. Access denied. I picked up a heavy decorative stone from the garden. I did not hesitate. I smashed the glass pane of the back door. The sound of shattering glass was satisfying a violent release of the pressure building inside me. I reached in, unlocked the latch, and stepped inside. The house was silent. It smelled of lemon polish and stale air. I walked into the living room. It felt different, lighter. I flipped on the switch. The bookshelves were half empty. Evan's collection of vintage vinyl records was gone. His leather armchair was gone. The painting his mother had given us was gone. He had not just left, he had moved out. He must have had movers here all day, while I was at the office preparing for the party. He had erased himself from the house before he even told me it was over. I walked into the kitchen. The counters were bare, except for one object sitting on the marble island, my wedding ring. He must have taken it from my jewelry box. It sat there on the cold stone, shimmering under the pendant lights. It did not look like a symbol of love anymore. It looked like a receipt, a final invoice, paid in full, service terminated. I did not touch it. I walked to the refrigerator. There was a single sheet of paper taped to the stainless steel door. It was typed, not handwritten. Typed, Josephine, my lawyer will contact you regarding the separation of assets and the dissolution of our partnership. Do not attempt to contact me personally. All communication must go through legal channels. Evan. It was cold, clinical. It read like a notice of termination for an underperforming employee. I stared at the note. He thought he had won. He thought that by locking me out of the company and locking me out of the house, he had stripped me of my power. He thought I was just the wife who handled the paperwork. I walked to the dining table and opened my laptop bag. I took out my personal MacBook. I sat down, the glass from the broken door crunching under my heels. I opened the laptop and navigated to the company portal. Login failed. Account suspended. I tried the backup admin portal. Access denied. I tried the cloud server. Access denied. He had been thorough. He had cut every digital cord that connected me to Northline Meridian. I sat there in the dim light of the kitchen, the silence of the empty house pressing down on me. I felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy, I wanted to lay my head on the table and sleep for a week. But then, I remembered the email, the notification I had received at the party. I pulled my phone out of my purse. I opened the email again. System alert. Administrator access revoked. I stared at it. I zoomed in. Evan was a brilliant salesman. He could sell ice to a polar bear. But he was not a technical founder. I knew the architecture of our system because I wrote the original code. I looked at the metadata of the automated message. Most people ignored the lines of code at the bottom of a system alert, the routing information that told the server where to send the log. Evan had revoked my access, yes, but he had forgotten one thing. When we founded the company, we used a shared root access protocol. To save money in the early days, we linked the super admin recovery logs to a private server I ran from home, a server I used for freelance projects before we made it big. A server that was not part of the company infrastructure. I looked at the bottom of the email. At the routing path, authorized by admin underscore console underscore 01 user underscore IP 192.168.1.45. Time underscore stamp January 24th, 1400 hours. My breath caught in my throat. January 24th. That was 2 weeks ago. He had not revoked my access tonight. He had set up a scheduled task to revoke it tonight, but the command, the actual keystrokes that authorized the lockout, had been entered 2 weeks ago. And the user IP? I knew that IP address. It was not Evan's office computer. It was not his laptop. It was the dedicated IP address for the guest Wi-Fi network at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown. I checked my calendar for January 24th. Evan had told me he was at a client site in Chicago that day. He had sent me photos of the snow, but the system log said the command was entered from a hotel in our city. I tapped the screen, highlighting the line of text. He had lied about his location. He had premeditated the lockout while lying to my face, but more importantly, by scheduling the task through a remote connection on a hotel network instead of the secure office hardline. He had bypassed the internal security protocols that scrubbed user identity. The system had logged the device ID of the machine that sent the command. Device underscore name M underscore Vail underscore MacBook underscore Pro. I froze. Marissa. Marissa had logged into the super admin console. Marissa had scheduled the lockout, which meant Marissa had been given Evan's root password. Sharing root access passwords with non-executive personnel was a Class A violation of our company's operating agreement. It was an immediate breach of fiduciary duty. It was grounds for instant removal from the board. Evan thought he had locked me out. He thought he had cut off my hands. But in his arrogance, in his laziness, he had let his mistress do his dirty work. I looked at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. The panic in my chest began to recede, replaced by something colder, something sharper. A smile touched my lips. It was not the polite smile I had worn at the party. It was the smile of a predator who has just spotted a wounded animal. I whispered into the empty, broken silence of my kitchen. You just exposed a fatal flaw. I am 39 years old, and until 48 hours ago, I believed that hard work was the only currency that mattered. I did not come from money. I did not come from a family with connections or a legacy of Ivy League degrees. My father was a mechanic who scrubbed grease from his fingernails every night with a stiff brush, and my mother managed the inventory for a local grocery store. I learned from them that you build your life with your hands, and you do not ask for permission to take up space. I was the operational brain, the one who understood that a vision is nothing without a logistical map to get there. I was proud of that. I wore my capability like a suit of armor, but looking back now, sitting in the silence of this empty house, I realize that capability can be a blindfold. You get so busy keeping the machine running that you do not notice when the person standing next to you starts loosening the bolts. My history with Evan Caldwell did not start in a boardroom. It started in the break room of a mid-sized logistics firm where we were both overworked and underappreciated. I was 29 then, a senior analyst who could spot a supply chain inefficiency from a mile away. Evan was in sales. He had that rare magnetic quality that made people want to say yes to him before they even knew what he was selling. He was charming. Yes, but back then, he was also hungry. We used to meet for coffee at 3 p.m, both of us eyeing the clock. Both of us complaining about management that was too slow, too risk-averse, too dinosaur-like to see where the market was going. One rainy Tuesday in November, 10 years ago, Evan leaned across the scratched Formica table and whispered a question that would change the trajectory of my entire life. Why are we making other people rich? Josephine, he asked. We have the skills. You know the systems. I know the clients. Why are we not doing this for ourselves? It was the terrifying thrill of that question that made me fall in love with him. We were partners in crime before we were lovers. We quit our jobs on the same day. We cashed out our 401ks, terrifying our parents. And we moved to Stonebridge Ridge, a town that was just starting to transition from a sleepy suburb to a hub for new money. We founded Northline Meridian Consulting on a laptop I had bought, refurbished, and a folding table in the corner of our rented apartment living room. We were not glamorous. We were consultants for retail supply chains and warehouse operations. It was unsexy work. It meant spending days in dusty distribution centers, figuring out why a pallet of goods was moving 12% slower than it should. It meant nights spent staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned and the numbers danced. I remember the first 2 years vividly. They were the hardest and the happiest years of my life. We were soldiers in a trench. There were months when we could not pay ourselves. There was a week when we had $87 in the business account and a tax bill due on Monday. I remember crying in the shower, the water masking my sobs, terrified we had made a mistake. Evan came in, fully dressed, and sat on the edge of the tub. He did not offer empty platitudes. He handed me a towel and said, "We will figure it out. You handle the cash flow projection. I will go get the check from the client in Jersey. I will not leave their lobby until they pay us." And he did. He drove 4 hours, sat in a reception area for 6 hours, and came back with a check. That was the Evan I married. The Evan who was a partner. The Evan who understood that we were the entity. Not him, not me, but us. When the money finally started coming in, it felt like oxygen. We grew. We hired our first employee, then our 5th, then our 20th. We moved from the living room to a co-working space, and then to the glass-walled office park where I was humiliated 2 nights ago. We bought this house 5 years ago. It was the physical manifestation of the American dream we had chased down. It is a white timber colonial with black shutters and a wraparound porch that looks out over a manicured lawn. I remember the day we got the keys. I walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls, imagining the life we would fill it with. I decorated every square inch of this place. I chose the shade of blue for the dining room because Evan said it reminded him of the ocean. I planted the hydrangeas in the back because his mother loved them. I built a sanctuary for him to come home to, a place where he could take off the mask of the CEO and just be the man I loved. But somewhere along the line, the roles hardened. In the beginning, we did everything together, but as Northline Meridian expanded, we naturally gravitated toward our strengths. I became the invisible hand. I was the one who built the HR protocols, the one who negotiated the vendor contracts, the one who fired people when they needed to be let go, the one who stayed up until 2 a.m. fixing server crashes. I was the chief operating officer, but in practice, I was the spine of the company. Evan became the face. He was the one on the magazine covers. He was the one giving keynote speeches at industry conferences. He was the one taking clients out for $500 dinners while I was at the office approving the expense reports for those dinners. I was fine with that. I am an introvert. I do not need the spotlight. I just need the work to be done right. I thought he respected that. I thought he understood that the person standing on the stage can only stand there because someone else built the platform. Then came Marissa. 3 years ago. We needed a new head of data analytics. The interview process was grueling. We saw 15 candidates. Marissa Vale was the 16th. She was younger than me, perhaps 33 at the time. She had a resume that was sharp, precise, and impressive. She walked into my office wearing a suit that was tailored to perfection. Her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She did not interview like the others. She did not seem nervous. She answered my technical questions with an ease that bordered on boredom. She was good with numbers, terrifyingly good. She could look at a data set and find the anomaly in seconds. But there was something else, a tone, a way of speaking that was soft, almost deferential, but felt practiced. I admire what you have built here. Josephine, she had said during that first interview, it is so rare to see a woman holding the reins of the back end. Most women want to be out front, looking pretty, but you are the engine, aren't you? At the time, I took it as a compliment. I thought she saw me. Now, I replay that moment and I hear the condescension dripping from the words. She had a habit of calling me sister in the break room. Hey, sister, do you like this coffee, sister? That dress is so sensible. It was a way of creating a false intimacy. a way of lowering my guard. I watched her integrate herself into the team. She was efficient. She made herself indispensable to the junior staff. But I also remember a moment, about 3 months after she started. I was walking past the conference room late one evening. The lights were off, but the door was ajar. Marissa was standing inside, alone. She was not working. She was standing at the head of the long mahogany table Evan's spot. She was running her hand along the back of the leather chair. She looked out the window at the skyline, then looked around the room. It was not a look of admiration. It was the look of a surveyor. She was measuring the square footage. She was calculating the value of the assets. She looked like someone deciding where to put her own furniture. I remember stopping in the hallway, a strange chill running down my spine. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was just ambitious, and I valued ambition. I had hired her for her ambition. I brushed it off and went back to my office to finish the payroll audit. That was my mistake. I treated intuition like a glitch in the data, something to be ignored if it could not be quantified. The shift in Evan was gradual. It is like watching a house settle. You do not notice the cracks until the doorframe is crooked. It started with his language. For 7 years. It was always we. We landed the account. We need to cut costs. We are expanding. Then, about 18 months ago, the pronouns began to change. I remember a dinner with a potential investor. Evan was telling the story of our founding a story I knew by heart, because I had lived every second of it. I realized there was a gap in the market. Evan said, swirling his wine, I decided to take the risk. I mortgaged my future to build the infrastructure. I sat there, freezing. My future. I touched his arm gently. Honey, we mortgaged our future. He looked at me, irritated, as if I had interrupted a soliloquy. Right, of course, but you know what I mean, Josephine. I had the vision for the client base. He brushed me off. It was a small moment, a tiny scratch on the record. But then it happened again, and again, in staff meetings. He would say, my team. In emails, he would write, I have decided. He stopped asking for my input on strategy. He started treating me less like a partner and more like a high-level employee who was becoming inconveniently opinionated. When I raised concerns about operational risks, he would roll his eyes. You are too cautious. Josephine, you do not understand the big picture. You are stuck in the weeds. The weeds. That is what he called the systems that kept his company from being sued, from going bankrupt, from collapsing under its own weight. He called my life's work the weeds. I see now that Marissa was feeding this. I would see them in his office, heads close together over a laptop. She would be laughing at his jokes that were not funny. She would be nodding enthusiastically at his wildest, most reckless ideas. Ideas that I would have to shoot down later because they were legally impossible. She became the yes to my no. She became the faux, admiring audience, while I became the nagging reality check. It is a classic dynamic, isn't it? The wife becomes the mother figure, the buzzkill, the one reminding you to eat your vegetables and pay your taxes. The mistress becomes the fantasy, the mirror that reflects only the golden god you want to believe you are. But I never thought Evan would cross the line. I thought we were bound by something stronger than romance. We were bound by the trenches. We were bound by the memory of eating instant noodles on the floor of an empty apartment. I thought shared struggle created a loyalty that was unbreakable. I was naive. Betrayal is not a sudden explosion. It is a slow erosion. It does not begin with a kiss in a hotel room. It begins the moment one person decides that they are the main character and everyone else is just a supporting actor. It begins when someone rewrites the history of your shared life to edit you out of the credits. Evan did not just cheat on me with Marissa because she was younger or prettier, or more willing to stroke his ego. He cheated because she allowed him to believe the lie he wanted to tell himself, that he did it all alone, that he was a genius who was being held back by a cautious wife. Sitting here now, looking at the wedding photo on the mantelpiece that he did not even bother to turn face down, I realize the truth. He thinks he built the mountain. He forgot that I am the one who drew the map, packed the gear, and carried the supplies so he could climb to the peak and plant his flag. He wants to be the king. He wants Marissa to be his queen, and he wants me to be the peasant who disappears quietly into the village. But he forgot where I came from. I am not a peasant. I am the architect, and an architect knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are. He thinks he can rewrite the story. Fine, but he forgets that I am the one who holds the pen to the real story, the legal story, the financial story, the story written in ink and signatures and timestamps. He wants to erase me, but you cannot erase the foundation without bringing the whole house down. And if the house has to come down, I will make sure I am the one controlling the demolition. The morning sun hit the shattered glass on the kitchen floor, turning the shards into glittering diamonds. I had slept on the sofa, fully clothed, clutching my laptop like a shield. My neck was stiff, and my eyes felt gritty, but my mind was operating with a terrifying clarity. I was not a wife waking up in her marital home anymore. I was a squatter in a war zone. At 8 o'clock exactly, my phone rang. The screen displayed his name, Evan. I stared at it for a moment. My instinct was to ignore it, to scream, to throw the phone against the wall. But I took a breath. I slid my thumb across the screen and answered. I did not speak first. Josephine, Evan said. His voice was calm, reasonable, and utterly devoid of guilt. It was his boardroom voice. I was notified by the alarm company that there was a breach at the property last night. I assume that was you breaking a window? He made it sound like I was a vandal defacing public property. Not a woman entering her own home. You changed the locks. Evan, I said. My voice was raspy. You locked me out of my house. I secured the property. He corrected me, his tone smooth. Given your display at the party last night, I thought it was best to establish some boundaries. We need to handle this civilly. Josephine, for the sake of the company, we cannot have you acting erratically. It confuses the staff. It worries the investors. I gripped the phone. Erratically. You announced a divorce and fired me in front of 200 people. I did not fire you, he said, sighing as if he were explaining simple math to a slow child. I announced a leave of absence. You are burned out. Everyone can see it. You are emotional. You are volatile. Look at what you did to the back door. That is not the behavior of a stable executive. That is the behavior of someone who needs help. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was not just a breakup talk. This was a diagnosis. He was building a file. He was using corporate language to paint me as mentally unfit. If he could prove I was unstable, he could trigger the incapacity clauses in our shareholder agreement. He could strip me of my voting rights without even buying me out. I am not unstable. Evan, I said, forcing my voice to remain flat, and I am not stepping down. We will discuss the terms later, he said. My lawyer is drafting a proposal. It is very generous. It includes a full severance package and a monthly stipend for your recovery. Do not make this ugly. Josephine, do not embarrass yourself. Do not embarrass the company we built. He hung up. He did not say the company we built. He meant the company I am taking. A moment later, a text message popped up on my screen. It was not from Evan. It was from Marissa. I know you are hurting right now, and I'm so sorry it has to be this way. But please, for your own peace of mind, you should let go. Fighting will only destroy the good memories. Take the offer. Take care of yourself. I stared at the words. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. She was feigning kindness to assert dominance. She was telling me that she had won, that she was now the one looking out for Evan's interests, and that I was the tragic, broken thing that needed to be discarded gently. Good memories. As if she had not been calculating the liquidation value of those memories while standing in my office. I blocked her number. I needed to move. I could not sit in the house and let them spin the narrative. I needed to show my face. I grabbed my blazer, brushed the glass off my heels, and drove to the office. The drive was a blur. When I pulled into the parking lot of Northline Meridian, I saw my reserved spot. The paint on the asphalt still said J. Hernandez, but a new, sleek black convertible was parked in it. Marissa's car. It was a petty territorial move. She was marking her territory. I parked in the visitor lot and walked to the front entrance. The glass doors slid open, and the cool air of the lobby hit me. I walked toward the elevators, my badge in my hand. I tapped it against the security reader. Beep, beep, beep. A red light flashed. Access denied. I tapped it again. The red light mocked me. Ms. Hernandez. I turned. Paul, the head of building security, was standing behind the desk. He looked uncomfortable. He would not meet my eyes. He was looking at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. I am sorry. Ms. Hernandez, Paul said, his voice low. I cannot let you up. My badge is malfunctioning. Paul, I said, keeping my chin up, please buzz me in. It is not a malfunction, he said, shifting his weight. I have a directive from Mr. Caldwell's office. You have been placed on the restricted list. No access to the executive floor. No access to the server room. You are only allowed in the guest reception area, and only if you have a scheduled appointment. I felt the blood rush to my face. I was the co-founder. I had hired Paul. I had signed the lease for this building, and now I was being treated like a disgruntled ex-employee with a grudge. Paul, I said, stepping closer, you know who I am. You know I own 50% of this building's lease. I know, Paul said, and I saw genuine pained sympathy in his eyes. But he is the CEO. The directive is signed by him and legal. If I let you up, I lose my job. I have 2 kids in college. Ms. Hernandez, please, do not make me call the police. The police. Evan wanted that. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to force my way past the turnstile so he could have footage of me being dragged out by security. See? He would say, she is violent. She is dangerous. I took a step back. I looked past the turnstiles, into the lobby where the employees were coming in for the morning shift. I saw them, the people I had hired, the people I had trained. Some of them saw me standing there, barred from entering. They quickly looked down at their phones, pretending to be absorbed in emails. They were afraid. They knew that acknowledging me might put a target on their backs. Fear is a potent virus in a corporate environment, and Evan had infected the whole building overnight. But I saw others, the newer hires, the ones Marissa had brought in. They looked at me and whispered to each other. They were watching the show. To them, I was not the founder. I was the drama. Then, I saw Derek Sloan. Derek was one of our first operations managers. He was a good man, honest to a fault, the kind of guy who still believed in handshake deals. He was walking toward the elevators, holding a stack of files. He looked up and saw me. He stopped. He looked at Paul, then at me. His face hardened. He did not look away. He nodded, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. He walked toward the reception desk, as if he were going to grab a mint from the bowl. As he passed me, he stumbled slightly, dropping a file folder on the counter next to my hand. Sorry, he muttered, clumsy. He did not look at me. He gathered his things, but he left a small, yellow sticky note attached to the bottom of a brochure on the counter. I covered it with my hand, palmed it, and turned away from the security desk. Thank you. Paul, I said loudly, I will wait for my lawyer to call. I walked out the revolving doors, my head high, but my insides were churning. I got into my car and opened my hand. The note was scrawled in Derek's jagged handwriting. Check the formation documents, the Series A filing. There is something you need to see. Watch your back. My heart hammered against my ribs. Formation documents. Those were from 7 years ago. Why would Derek be telling me to look at paperwork from the founding days I started the car? But I did not go home. I could not go back to that empty, violated house. I needed ground under my feet. I needed truth. I drove 40 minutes to the other side of town, to a small neighborhood of brick row houses. I pulled up in front of number 42, my mother's house, my mother. Elena was a woman who did not believe in tears. She believed in action. She was sweeping her front porch when I pulled up, when she saw me get out of the car, saw my pale face and the frantic energy in my eyes. She did not ask what happened. She leaned her broom against the railing and opened her arms. I walked into her embrace and felt the tension in my shoulders snap. I did not cry, but I sagged against her. She smelled of laundry detergent and roasted garlic. "Come inside," she said. "I made soup." She sat me down at her kitchen table. It was a small table covered in a plastic tablecloth, a sharp contrast to the marble island in my house, but it felt more real. She put a bowl of soup in front of me and sat opposite. Her hands clasped. I told her everything: the party, the lockout, the bank accounts, Marissa. My mother listened without interrupting. She did not gasp. She did not act shocked. She just nodded, her eyes dark and angry. "He is a thief," she said simply. "He thinks because he wears a suit. He is not a thief, but he is stealing your life. He has the lawyers." "Mama," I said, "he has the board. He has the passwords. You have the truth," she said, pointing a finger at me. "And you have your memory. You told me once that you read every paper before you signed it. Did you?" "Yes," I said, "always." "Then find what he is hiding," she said. "Men like him, they always think they are smarter than the paper. But the paper remembers. The paper remembers. Derek's note. Check the formation documents." I stood up. "I need to check my files. The hard copies. I kept a backup set here, in the garage, from when we moved offices 3 years ago." My mother nodded. "Go. I will clean up." I went to the garage. It was dusty, filled with boxes of old clothes and holiday decorations. In the corner, under a tarp, was a metal filing cabinet. It contained the archives of Northline Meridian's first 5 years, the years before everything went digital, the years before I trusted the cloud. I yanked open the top drawer. It groaned in protest. I flipped through the hanging folders. Tax returns 2018, lease agreements, vendor contracts. I found the folder labeled Incorporation Operating Agreement. I pulled it out. The paper felt heavy, substantial. I sat on a stack of old magazines and opened the folder. There were the Articles of Incorporation. I saw my signature. I saw Evan's signature. 50-50 ownership. I scanned the standard clauses. Decision-making. Dissolution. It all looked standard. Then I turned to the back, to the section on Series A fundraising. This was from 5 years ago. When we took our first outside money, I flipped through the pages. Term sheets, valuation caps, and then I stopped. Stuck to the back of the shareholder rights agreement was a single page. It was titled Spousal Consent and Proxy Waiver. I frowned. I remembered signing a spousal consent form. It is standard in startups. It basically says that if we get divorced, I cannot force the sale of his shares, and he cannot force the sale of mine, to protect the investors. But as I read the text of this specific page, the blood drained from my face faster than it had at the party. This was not a standard waiver. Clause 4.2. In the event of a deadlock in executive voting, the undersigned Josephine Hernandez hereby grants an irrevocable proxy to the CEO, Evan Caldwell, to cast the deciding vote on all matters regarding operational restructuring and executive tenure. I stared at the paragraph, irrevocable proxy. That meant that legally, in any dispute about who runs the company, my vote did not count. My 50% ownership was financially real, but operationally, it was mute. This clause gave Evan total dictatorship over my job. My eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There was a signature. Josephine Hernandez. I traced the ink with my finger. It looked like my signature. The loops were right. The slant was right. But I did not sign this. I have a habit, a quirk I picked up from my father. Whenever I sign a legal document of high importance, I always put a tiny, almost invisible dot inside the loop of the J. It is my secret watermark, a way to know that I was fully present and conscious when I signed it. I brought the paper closer to my face. I squinted at the signature under the garage light. There was no dot. I flipped back to the previous page. The standard shareholder agreement. There, in my signature, was the tiny dot. I flipped forward to the waiver, no dot. And then I noticed the date next to the signature. October 14th. October 14th. 5 years ago. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. October 14th. That was the day I was in the hospital. I had emergency appendicitis. I was under general anesthesia for 4 hours. I was groggy for 24 hours after that. Evan had brought papers to the hospital room. He had said it was urgent. He had said, "Just sign here, honey, so we can get the wire transfer for the investment." You do not need to read it. It is just the standard stuff we talked about. I remembered him holding the pen for me because my hand was shaking from the medication. I remembered looking into his eyes that looked so worried, so loving and trusting him, but I did not sign this page. I would never have signed away my voting rights. He had slipped this page into the stack, or he had traced my signature later, or he had guided my drugged hand to a page I could not read. He had been planning this for 5 years. He had planted a kill switch in our company when we were just getting started, waiting for the day he might need to use it. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was structural. He had built our empire on a trapdoor, and I had been standing on it the whole time. I sat alone in the dusty garage, holding the paper that proved my husband was not just a cheater, but a fraud. The shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, hard realization. He thought this document was his shield. He thought this piece of paper made him untouchable, but he had forgotten the one rule of fraud: if the signature is tainted, the whole contract is poison. I stood up, clutching the file. I was not just going to divorce him, I was going to nullify him. "You want to play by the rules of the paper. Evan," I whispered to the empty air. "Fine, but you should have checked the date." I did not go to a therapist to heal my broken heart. I went to a shark to sharpen my teeth. Talia Brooks was a legend in the city, not because she was kind, but because she was lethal. Her office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower that looked down on the rest of the financial district like a judge on a bench. The room was sterile, decorated in shades of slate and charcoal, with no personal photos, no plants, nothing that suggested a human life outside of litigation. I sat opposite her, the file from my mother's garage resting on the glass desk between us. Talia flipped through the pages, her face unreadable. She was a woman of indeterminate age, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob that looked like it could slice paper. She closed the file and looked at me. Her eyes were not sympathetic. They were calculating. "He is not just leaving you." "Josephine," Talia said. Her voice was low, a precise instrument. "He is liquidating you. Most men cheat and want to keep the house. Your husband wants to keep the kingdom and exile you to the wilderness. He is playing 2 games at once. He is fighting a matrimonial war to destroy your spirit, and a corporate war to steal your equity." I nodded. "I know. That is why I'm here. He thinks I am weak. He thinks you are emotional." Talia corrected. "There is a difference. He is banking on you collapsing under the weight of the betrayal, so that you sign whatever settlement he puts in front of you just to make the pain stop. Are you going to do that?" "No," I said. The word felt solid in my mouth. "Good." Talia leaned forward. "Now, let us talk about the anatomy of this company. I see the forged proxy waiver. We will use that. It is a nuclear option for later. It proves fraud. But fraud takes time to prove in court. We need something faster. We need a tourniquet to stop the bleeding of your authority." She opened a legal pad and picked up a fountain pen. "Tell me about the day you incorporated. Not the emotional memory, the procedural memory. Who filed the articles of incorporation? Who signed the operating agreement? Who holds the physical stock certificates?" I closed my eyes, transporting myself back 7 years. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. Evan was in the conference room of our co-working space, pitching to a potential angel investor who never ended up writing a check. He was wearing his lucky blue tie. He was animated, laughing, selling the dream. I was in the back office, surrounded by stacks of paper from the Secretary of State. I said, opening my eyes. Evan was busy. He said he did not have the patience for the bureaucracy. He told me to handle the red tape. I filed the papers online. I paid the filing fee with my personal credit card because the business account was not open yet. Talia's pen hovered over the paper. And the structure. You said you handled the taxes. Yes, I said. About 3 years ago, when we started making real profit. I restructured us. I created a holding company, Northline Holdings, LLC, to hold the intellectual property and the assets. The operating company, Northline Meridian, pays a licensing fee to the holding company. It was a strategy to minimize our self-employment tax liability and protect the assets from liability suits. Talia stopped writing. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a wolf that just found an open gate in the sheep pen. And who are the members of Northline Holdings, LLC? She asked softly. We both are, I said, 50-50. But who is the manager? Talia asked. In an LLC, if it is manager-managed, the manager has the control, regardless of the ownership percentage. I blinked. I remembered the conversation. Evan had been complaining about the amount of paperwork involved in the restructuring. Just put your name on the admin line. Joe, he had said, I do not want to sign 50 forms. Just get it done so we can save the tax money. I whispered, I am the sole manager of the holding company. Talia capped her pen. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Then you have him, she said. He is fighting for control of the operating company, Northline Meridian. He thinks that because he is the CEO there, he runs the show. But Northline Meridian is just a tenant. Northline Holdings owns the house, and you are the landlord. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. If Northline Holdings owns the intellectual property, the algorithms, the client lists, the branding, and you control Northline Holdings, you can technically revoke the license for Northline Meridian to use those assets if they are in breach of contract. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Can I really do that? We are not going to do it yet, Talia said. Turning back to me, we are going to hold it like a knife behind our backs. First, we need to secure the perimeter. We are going to file for a temporary restraining order on all marital and business assets. We are going to freeze the bank accounts so he cannot drain them to pay his mistress or his lawyers. And we are going to get you back into your house. He changed the locks. I said, so change them back. Talia said simply, it is marital property. His name is on the deed, but so is yours. He cannot legally lock you out without a court order, which he does not have yet. He is bluffing. Call a locksmith. But do it right. Take the deed. Take your driver's license. And take a camera. I left Talia's office with a strategy that felt less like a legal defense and more like a military invasion. 2 hours later, I pulled into the driveway of my home in Stonebridge Ridge. I was not alone. I had a licensed locksmith with me, a man named Gary who looked like he had seen everything in his line of work. This is the deed, I said, handing Gary the paperwork I had retrieved from the safe deposit box on my way over. And this is my identification. Gary glanced at the papers, then at the house. Husband lock you out? Yes. Happens more than you think. He grunted. He walked up to the front door with his drill. I did not just stand there. I took out my phone and started recording. I narrated the date and time. It is February 3rd, 2026, 11:30 in the morning. I am regaining access to my primary residence. The sound of the drill biting into the metal of the lock was satisfying. It was a screeching, grinding noise that felt like it was tearing down the wall Evan had tried to build between me and my life within 5 minutes. The door swung open. Do you want new keys? Gary asked. Yes, I said, and I want a high-security deadbolt, one that cannot be picked. Once Gary was working, I walked inside. The house was still quiet, still empty of Evan's things. But now, instead of feeling like a victim, I felt like an investigator entering a crime scene. I moved room to room, photographing everything. I took pictures of the empty spaces on the walls where art used to hang. I took pictures of the empty shelves in the study. I opened the closets and documented what was missing. I opened the safe in the master bedroom closet. It was empty. My jewelry pieces my grandmother had left me. Pieces I had bought for myself with my first bonus was gone. I felt a stab of panic, but I forced it down. Document it. I told myself, do not feel it. Document it. I took a picture of the empty safe. Then I went to the home office. I logged onto the Wi-Fi. It was still working. Evan had revoked my company access, but he had forgotten to cut off the home internet service which was in my name. I sat down at the desk and opened my email. I had a message from Talia. She had copied me on the letter she just sent to Evan's lawyer. Dear Counsel, please be advised that your client, Mr. Evan Caldwell, has unlawfully engaged in the dissipation of marital assets and attempted an illegal constructive eviction of my client, Mrs. Josephine Hernandez, from her primary residence. We have re-entered the property in accordance with state property laws. Any further attempt to obstruct Mrs. Hernandez's access to her home will be met with an immediate motion for emergency sanctions. I smiled. It was polite, professional, and absolutely threatening. My phone pinged. A text from Evan. You broke into the house. Are you insane? That is breaking and entering. I am calling the police. I typed back, my fingers flying across the screen. I did not break in. I hired a locksmith. I have the deed. And if you call the police, I will show them the empty safe and file a report for grand larceny regarding my missing jewelry. Do you really want a squad car in the driveway where the neighbors can see the 3 dots of his typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again? Finally, the typing stopped. He did not reply. He knew I was right. He cared about his image more than anything. A police cruiser in the driveway of his perfect suburban home did not fit the narrative of the successful CEO. I had won the skirmish. But the battle was just starting. I spent the afternoon turning the dining room into a war room. I brought in boxes of financial records I had stored in the basement. I knew that if I wanted to beat Evan, I needed to follow the money. Evan was good at making money, but he was terrible at tracking it. He treated company funds like a personal piggy bank. At 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was a courier sent by Talia. He handed me a heavy envelope. Forensic accounting preliminary sweep. The courier said, I took the envelope into the kitchen. I made myself a cup of black coffee. I needed the caffeine. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. I had authorized Talia to hire a forensic accountant to audit our personal accounts and the company's expense accounts for the last 6 months. I knew Evan had been spending money. I just did not know how much. I cut the seal on the envelope and slid out the report. It was a thick stack of spreadsheets, color-coded and flagged. I started reading. The first few pages were standard: mortgage payments, utility bills, car leases. Then I got to the credit card statements, the cards that were supposed to be for business entertainment. My breath hitched as I ran my finger down the column. The Ritz-Carlton, downtown, $400. November 12th, the Ritz-Carlton, downtown, $400. November 14th, the Ritz-Carlton, downtown, $400. November 18th. He was not just meeting Marissa there. He was practically living there. I turned the page to December. Tiffany Company, $5,600. December 20th. I looked at my hand. I was not wearing any new jewelry. I had not received a gift from Tiffany's in 5 years. He had bought her a bracelet with our money just 5 days before Christmas. I felt a wave of nausea. I remembered Christmas morning. We had hosted dinner for his parents. He had given me a scarf, a wool scarf. He had smiled and kissed my cheek, while he had a $5,000 bracelet waiting for another woman. But it was the next page that made my blood turn to ice. The accountant had flagged a series of transfers from the operating account to a vendor labeled Consulting Services V. I did not recognize the vendor name. January 2nd. Transfer $8,000. January 15th. Transfer $12,000. January 30th. Transfer $15,000. $35,000 in 1 month. I looked at the notes the accountant had scribbled in the margin. No invoice attached. No contract on file. Funds wired to a personal checking account. I looked closer at the bank routing number for the recipient. It looked familiar. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app for our joint checking account. I searched through the transfer history. Years ago, before Marissa was an employee, before she was a threat. She had been a contractor for a brief project. We had paid her via direct deposit. I found the old record. I compared the routing numbers. They matched. Evan was not just buying her dinner. He was siphoning company funds directly into her personal bank account under the guise of fake consulting fees. He was embezzling. He was stealing from investors, from the tax authorities, and from me to fund his affair. I sat back in the chair, the silence of the house ringing in my ears. This was not just grounds for divorce. This was a felony. He had gotten sloppy. He was so arrogant, so sure that I was just the paperwork wife, that he thought I would never look at the raw data. He thought I would just sign the tax returns at the end of the year without asking questions. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. Total unauthorized disbursements, $52,000. You idiot, I whispered, my voice shaking with a mix of horror and dark satisfaction. You didn't just break my heart. You broke the law. I picked up my phone and dialed Talia. I have the report, I said when she answered, and Talia asked, he is funneling cash. I said, tens of thousands of dollars, direct wires to her personal account, no invoices, no documentation, it is embezzlement. Talia, I could hear the smile in Talia's voice through the phone line. Excellent, she said. Do not sleep tonight. Josephine, I want you to find every single cent. By tomorrow morning, we are not just going to file for divorce, we are going to file a derivative lawsuit on behalf of the shareholders. I hung up the phone and looked at the spreadsheet again. The numbers blurred, then sharpened. They were no longer just digits, they were bullets, and I had a full clip. The digital recorder sat on my dining room table, a small black box that contained the sound of my execution. Derek had risked his job to get this for me. He had slid his phone into his shirt pocket during the all-hands meeting that morning and hit record. Now, sitting in the silence of the house I had reclaimed, I listened to my husband bury me. Josephine has been carrying a heavy load for a long time. Evan's voice tinny and distorted through the speaker. We all know how passionate she is. But passion can burn you out, for personal reasons, and to focus on her mental health. Josephine has decided to voluntarily step back from day-to-day operations. I gripped the edge of the table, voluntarily. He was using the word like a shield. By framing it as my choice, he was protecting himself from wrongful termination suits and simultaneously signaling to the staff that I was too weak to lead. We wish her the best in her recovery. Evan continued. His voice dropped an octave, feigning a solemnity that made my stomach turn. In the interim, I am pleased to announce that Marissa Vale will be stepping up as Acting Chief Operating Officer. Marissa has been instrumental in our recent growth, and she understands the vision of Northline Meridian better than anyone. There was a pause on the recording. Then, the sound of polite, hesitant applause. It was not the thunderous clapping of an inspired team. It was the nervous applause of people who knew that if they did not clap, they might be next on the chopping block. Then, I heard her voice. Thank you. Evan, Marissa said. Her voice was smooth, confident, lacking even a tremor of hesitation. I know these are big shoes to fill. Josephine built incredible systems, but systems need to evolve. We need to look forward, not backward. I have prepared a slide deck outlining our strategy for the next 2 quarters. We are going to streamline. We are going to pivot. I stopped the recording. Pivot. That is corporate speak for we are going to gut the company and sell the parts. She was standing on the stage I built, holding the microphone I bought, presenting ideas that were likely stolen from the shared drive before my access was cut. It was identity theft, but legal. She was wearing my job like a costume. My phone buzzed. It was Derek. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street, the one with the bad coffee. 30 minutes. Come alone. I grabbed my coat. I needed to see him. The audio was bad, but the documents he promised were what I really needed. The diner was empty, smelling of grease and old coffee grounds. Derek was sitting in a booth in the back, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. I slid into the booth opposite him. I did not say hello. I just looked at him. Thank you, I said quietly. Derek looked around the diner nervously before sliding a thick manila envelope across the sticky table. If he finds out I gave you this, I am done, Derek said. He has IT monitoring our emails. I had to print these off a local server in the basement that is not synced to the cloud yet. Why are you doing this? Derek, I asked. You could just keep your head down. Keep your salary. Derek looked at me, his expression hard. Because I remember who hired me. Evan did not hire me. Josephine, you did. You fought for my salary when Evan wanted to lowball me, and I do not like bullies. What he is doing, it is not just a breakup, it is a purge. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of emails and internal memos. Look at the dates, Derek said, pointing to the top document. I looked. It was an email from Evan to a headhunter, dated 3 months ago. Subject: confidential search. COO replacement. Body. We are looking to transition our current operations leadership out by the end of the first quarter. We need someone who is aggressive, sales-oriented, and compliant. The current leadership is becoming an obstacle to our strategic exit. 3 months ago, we had gone on a weekend trip to Napa 3 months ago. We had walked through a vineyard holding hands. He had kissed me under an oak tree and told me he wanted to renew our vows. And the whole time, he had a draft email in his outbox looking for my replacement. Keep reading. Derek said. The second pile? I flipped through the papers. These were client contracts, but they looked wrong. The letterhead was different. Instead of Northline Meridian Consulting, the contracts were drafted under NMC Solutions, LLC. What is this, I asked. He is forcing the clients to resign. Derek explained. He is telling them it is just an administrative change, a rebranding. But NMC Solutions is a new entity. He registered it in Delaware 2 weeks ago. He is moving the revenue stream. He is signing the new deals with the new company, leaving the old company, the one you own half of, with all the debt and none of the income. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not just a takeover. It was a siphon. He was hollowing out Northline Meridian from the inside, transferring the blood of the business into a new vessel that had his name on it, and likely Marissa's, but not mine. He is stealing the revenue. I whispered, he is stealing the future. Derek corrected. And there is one more thing. Look at the last page. I turned to the back of the stack. It was a printout of a calendar invite from Evan's private schedule. Derek must have accessed it through the legacy sync on the basement server. Date February 10th. Location? The Capitol Grill. Meeting with A. Sterling. Managing Partner. Apex Capital. Topic: acquisition. Due diligence. I stared at the name. Apex Capital. They were a private equity firm known for buying mid-sized consultancy firms, stripping them of their assets, firing the senior staff, and merging them into massive conglomerates. He is selling the company, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He is not just selling it. Derek said, he is selling it cheap for a quick exit. Marissa used to work at a subsidiary of Apex. That is the connection. She is not just the mistress, Josephine. She is the broker. She brought him the deal. I sat back against the vinyl booth. The pieces finally fit. The affair was not just about lust. It was about greed. Marissa had whispered in his ear that he could be rich, truly rich, if he just sold the company, but to sell it. They needed to get rid of the one person who would never agree to sell to a chop shop like Apex, me. They had to paint me as unstable to trigger the incapacity clause so they could push the sale through without my vote. He is going to cash out, I said, my voice trembling with rage. He is going to take the 10 years of my life I poured into this business, turn it into a check from Apex Capital, and walk away with her. Not if you stop him, Derek said. He stood up. I have to go. If I'm late back from lunch. Marissa gets suspicious. She is watching the clock like a hawk. He walked out of the diner, leaving me with the evidence of a conspiracy that was so much deeper than a simple divorce. I drove straight to Talia's office. I did not even call ahead. I marched past the receptionist and threw the envelope onto Talia's glass desk. He is selling the company, I said, And he is diverting the revenue to a shell entity to devalue our current holdings before the sale. Talia picked up the documents. She scanned the email to the headhunter. She scanned the NMC Solutions contracts. She stopped at the Apex Capital calendar invite. Her eyes narrowed. "This is beautiful," she said. "Beautiful," I stared at her. "It is catastrophic." "No," Talia said, standing up and pacing the room. "It is actionable. This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty. He is self-dealing. He is diverting corporate opportunities to a personal entity, and by coordinating with a third party, Marissa, to devalue the company you jointly own, he is engaging in a conspiracy to defraud a shareholder." She turned to the whiteboard on her wall and uncapped a red marker. "We are going to file a motion for dissipation of assets," Talia said, writing the words in bold letters. "In a divorce, if one spouse wastes marital assets on an affair, the court orders them to pay it back. We already know about the jewelry and the hotel rooms. That is the small stuff. But this?" She tapped the NMC Solutions contract. "This is the main event. He is actively destroying the value of the marital estate to deny you your share. He thinks he is clever." I said, "He thinks because he created a new LLC. I cannot touch it. He is arrogant," Talia said. "Judges hate arrogance, and they hate husbands who try to starve their wives out of a settlement. We are going to trace every dollar. We are going to subpoena the bank records of NMC Solutions. We are going to subpoena Marissa's employment history to prove her link to Apex Capital." I sat down, my mind racing. I thought about the timeline. January 24th, the password lockout. January 30th, the $35,000 transfer to Marissa. February 1st, the consulting fees. February 3rd, the new LLC registration. February 10th, the meeting with Apex. It was a perfectly choreographed dance. He is in a rush. I observed. Why is he rushing? Why try to sell now? Talia looked at me. Because the market is softening, or because he needs the cash, or simply because he wants to erase you and start his new life before the summer. He wants a clean slate. He will not get a clean slate. I said, "I will make sure his slate is covered in so much legal chalk he will choke on it. We need to move fast." Talia said, "If he signs a letter of intent with Apex, it gets complicated. We need to freeze his authority before that meeting on the 10th. The proxy," I said, remembering the forged document from the garage. "The one with the missing dot." "Not yet," Talia said. "Save that. That is the kill shot. First, we wound him. We hit him with the dissipation claim. We get the judge to appoint a forensic receiver to oversee the company's finances. That will freeze the sale. No private equity firm will buy a company that is under court-ordered receivership." I nodded. It was a good plan. It was logical. But as I drove home that evening, the logic gave way to a wave of grief that nearly pulled me under. I pulled over to the side of the road. Near the entrance to our subdivision, I looked at the sign Stonebridge Ridge. We had taken a picture in front of that sign when we moved in. Evan had lifted me off the ground, spinning me around. "We made it, Joe." He had said, "We made it." He had looked at me with so much love then, or I thought it was love. Maybe it was just relief that he had found someone willing to carry the load for him. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I let myself feel it. The agonizing sting of being replaced, not just as a wife, but as a partner. He had replaced me with Marissa not just in his bed, but in the boardroom. He had found someone who could do the math and the dirty work. He was selling us out. He was selling the late nights. He was selling the weekends we spent painting the office walls. He was selling the panic attacks I talked him through. He was selling every sacrifice I had ever made, bundling it up into a portfolio, and handing it to a stranger for a wire transfer. I wiped my eyes. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but dry. I picked up my phone. I opened the photo of the calendar invite Derek had sent me. February 10th, the Capitol Grill. I knew that restaurant. It was where we celebrated our 5th anniversary. "You want to sell my life, Evan?" I said to the silence of the car. "You want to meet with Apex Capital." I put the car in gear. Then I think I should attend that meeting too. He had tried to lock me out. He had tried to hide the money. He had tried to rewrite the past. But he had made one critical error. He assumed I was just a scorned woman. He forgot that before I was his wife, I was his business partner, and I knew exactly how to kill a deal. Marissa was not just a mistress. She was the broker. Evan was the seller. And I was the poison pill. The fluorescent lights in Talia's office hummed with a low, buzzing sound that felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. We had been awake for 20 hours. The desk was covered in paper bank statements, corporate filings, and the bylaws of Northline Holdings. Talia was reading the operating agreement for the 10th time. She was looking for a loop, a knot, something we could pull to unravel Evan's power before the meeting with Apex Capital. "There has to be something," she muttered. "Standard boilerplate usually has a removal clause, but he owns 50%. We cannot vote him out without a majority. And 50% is not a majority. It is a deadlock." I rubbed my temples. I remembered the day we drafted this agreement. We were sitting in a cheap diner, eating greasy eggs. We had downloaded a template from the internet to save money on a lawyer. "Wait," I said. The memory surfaced slowly, like a wreck rising from the bottom of the ocean. We did not use the standard template, not for the final version. Talia looked up over her reading glasses. "What do you mean, I changed it?" I said, "About 4 years ago. Remember when that scandal happened with our competitor? The one where the CFO emptied the accounts and fled to the Caymans, the Horizon Logistics scandal." Talia said, "I remember. Evan was paranoid." I said, "He was terrified that an employee would steal from us. He made me rewrite the internal controls. But I told him that internal controls apply to everyone, even the founders." I grabbed the thick binder labeled Corporate Governance. I flipped past the standard articles. I turned to the back, to the addendums. There it was. Addendum 4C, the bad actor safeguard. I read the text out loud, my voice steady but my heart racing. In the event that any managing member is presented with credible, material evidence of embezzlement, fraud, or gross breach of fiduciary duty, their voting rights shall be immediately suspended pending a formal third-party audit. During this suspension, the remaining managing member shall assume full executive authority to protect the assets of the company. Talia snatched the binder from my hands. She read the paragraph. Then she read it again. "My God," she whispered, "it is self-executing. It does not require a judge. It does not require a court order. It just requires credible material evidence. I wrote it to protect the company from rogue employees." I said, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "I never thought the rogue would be my husband." "And look at the bottom," Talia said, pointing to the signature line. There was Evan's signature, big, bold, arrogant, and next to it, the stamp of a notary public. We had notarized it because we were refinancing a business loan at the time, and the bank wanted all our governance documents updated. He had signed his own death warrant 4 years ago because he was too busy worrying about other people stealing from him to realize he was signing away his right to steal from me. "We have the trigger," Talia said, her eyes gleaming. "Now we just need the bullet, the credible evidence. We have the $52,000 in transfers." I said, "That is a start," Talia said. "But for a suspension of a CEO on the eve of a sale, we need something that links the theft directly to a conspiracy. We need to prove he is not just bad with money, but that he is actively working against the company." My phone pinged. It was the forensic accountant. He had sent a new PDF, Subject Vendor Analysis, V Consulting. I opened the file on my phone. The accountant had run a background check on the entity receiving the wire transfers. Entity 5, Consulting Services, LLC, Registered Agent Marissa Vale, Registered Address, 12 Oak Street, Apartment 4B. I knew that address. It was Marissa's apartment. I had sent flowers there 2 years ago when she was out sick with the flu. "Here is the bullet," I said, showing the phone to Talia. "Evan is paying company money to a shell company owned by his mistress. And here is the kicker." I scrolled down to the transaction details. The memo line on the last wire transfer says, "Retainer for acquisition strategy." He is paying her with company funds to help him sell the company. Talia said, That is classic self-dealing. He is using corporate assets to fund a transaction that benefits him personally while harming the other shareholder. It is a textbook breach. I felt a surge of triumph, but it was quickly followed by a sharp stab of pain. Another email notification popped up. This one was from Derek. He was sending me the last batch of archives before he wiped his access to stay safe. Subject read only. Do not reply. Attached was a PDF of an email chain between Evan and Marissa from 6 months ago. Before the party, I opened it. Evan wrote, "I am worried Josephine is going to push back on the valuation. She is attached to the legacy clients." Marissa replied, "She does not see the big picture. Baby, she is stuck in the operations mindset. You need to take the lead." And then, Evan's response, the words that I will never be able to scrub from my brain. "You are right. Josephine is good at the grunt work. She is just the foundation layer. Essential to hold it up. Sure, but no one looks at the foundation. I am the builder. I am the skyscraper. She is just the concrete I poured to stand on." I stared at the screen. The room went silent. Just the concrete. For 10 years, I had held him up. When he was depressed because a deal fell through, I was the one who pulled him out of bed. When he was sick, I ran the meetings. When he forgot his mother's birthday, I bought the gift. I was the solid ground beneath his feet. And to him, that meant I was dirt. Something to be walked on. Something to be buried. Talia saw my face. She gently took the phone from my hand. She read the email. She did not offer pity. She offered a weapon. "He just admitted intent," she said softly. "He views the company as his sole creation and you as a utility." In a courtroom. This email destroys his argument that he was acting in the best interest of the partnership. It proves he sees you as an obstacle to be removed, not a partner to be respected. I took a deep breath. The pain was searing, but it was clarifying. It burned away the last remnants of love I had for him. "Print it," I said. "Print it all." I stood up. "I need more. I need character witnesses. If I'm going to walk into that meeting and suspend him, I need to show that the clients are loyal to me, not him." I picked up the office landline and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Robert," I said when the voice answered. Robert Vance was our biggest client. He ran a logistics empire worth $200 million. Evan liked to take him golfing, but I was the one who fixed his inventory crisis last Christmas Eve. Josephine Roberts' voice was warm. I heard, "Rumors. Are you okay? I am fighting." "Robert," I said, "Evan is trying to sell the company to Apex Capital. He is trying to push me out." There was a silence on the line. Then Robert spoke, his voice hard. "Apex. Those vultures, they ruined my brother's business in 90 days. I need to know where you stand." "Robert," I said, "if Evan sells, do you stay? I signed that contract because you promised me 24-hour uptime." "Joe," Robert said, "Evan is a nice guy to have a beer with, but I would not trust him to run a lemonade stand without you checking the inventory. If you are gone, I am gone. I will trigger the change of control clause and pull my account." "Will you put that in writing?" I asked. "Draft it," he said. "I will sign it tonight." I hung up. I had the money trail. I had the legal trigger. I had the client support. I checked my phone again. There was a notification from Instagram. Marissa. She had posted a story. It was a photo of a champagne glass with the caption, "New beginnings. Out with the old. In with the gold." Then, a direct message popped up from her account. "You are looking desperate. Sweetie, stalking the office. Trying to turn the staff. You are obsolete. Just go away and take the alimony. It is over." I stared at the message, obsolete, before I could even take a screenshot. The message disappeared. She had unsent it. She was trying to provoke me, to make me lash out, but she was too cowardly to leave a paper trail. But she did not know about the archiving software Talia had installed on my phone 2 days ago. Every notification, every message, every pixel that crossed my screen was being mirrored to a secure server. I looked at the saved image of her message on the server. "You want to talk about obsolete?" "Marissa," I whispered, "I just archived your harassment. We were packing up the files, ready to call it a night, when Talia's paralegal knocked on the door. She looked pale. She was holding a fax. "Ms. Brooks," she said. "The title search on the house just came back." Talia took the paper. She frowned. Her eyebrows knitted together. "What is it?" I asked. "He changed the deed." "No," Talia said slowly. "He did not change the deed. He leveraged it." She slapped the paper onto the desk. "3 weeks ago, Evan took out a secondary hard money loan against the equity in your home. $500,000, short term, high interest." How I asked, my voice rising. "He needs my signature for a home equity loan." "He forged it," Talia said, "just like he forged the proxy. But this is worse. Josephine, this is a hard money lender. These are not banks. These are predatory lenders. The terms state that if the borrower misses a single payment, or if the collateral the house is involved in a divorce dispute that threatens the asset's value, the loan is called in immediately." I looked at the document. The lender was a company called Ironclad Capital. He took $500,000 out of our house. I said, feeling the room spin. "Where's the money gone?" Talia said. "Likely sent to NMC Solutions to pay for the setup costs. Or maybe to pay off gambling debts. Or maybe just to hide it offshore. But that is not the problem. The problem is that by filing for divorce and freezing the assets, we have technically triggered the default clause. So I lose the house," I asked. I broke back in. I changed the locks. "And now I'm going to lose it because he took out a secret loan if we do not pay off the loan within 30 days of the default notice." "Yes," Talia said. "They will foreclose. And since the loan is secured by the property, they take the house first." I sank into the chair. He had not just stolen the company. He had strapped a bomb to our home. If I fought him, the house exploded. If I surrendered, he kept the money and I lost the house anyway. He had cornered me, or so he thought. I looked at the amount again. $500,000. I looked at Robert Vance's affidavit. I looked at the bad actor clause. I stood up. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. "He thinks the house is his leverage." I said, "He thinks I will back down to save the house. Most people would." Talia said, "I am not most people." I said, "He took that money to fund his exit. He needs that exit to pay back the loan. If the sale to Apex fails, he defaults on the loan personally. He goes bankrupt." "Yes," Talia said. "But you lose the house." "I can buy another house," I said. "But he cannot buy another reputation." I picked up the file containing the bad actor clause and the embezzlement evidence. "I am not going to save the house. Talia, I am going to use the house as the final nail in his coffin. If he wants a war of scorched earth, I will show him what fire really looks like." I checked the time. It was 2 a.m. "Get some sleep." I told Talia, "Tomorrow is the 10th. We have a meeting at the Capitol Grill to crash." I walked out into the cool night air. I did not go home. I drove to the 24-hour print shop. I needed to blow up the email about the concrete foundation to poster size. If I was just the concrete, I was going to make sure that when I cracked, the whole building fell down on top of him. The process server arrived at my mother's house at 7 a.m. He was a young man, chewing gum, clearly bored by the domestic tragedies he delivered for a living. He handed me a thick envelope, mumbled a standard legal greeting, and walked away before I could even close the door. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the package. I expected a standard divorce petition. I expected the usual boilerplate about irreconcilable differences. What I read made my hands shake. Not with sorrow, but with a cold, hard rage. Evan was not just suing for divorce, he was suing for damages. Petitioner Evan Caldwell claims respondent Josephine Hernandez has engaged in tortious interference with business operations, causing significant financial harm to Northline Meridian Consulting. Petitioner requests full ownership of the marital residence as partial compensation for lost revenue. He was blaming me. He was claiming that by locking him out of the house and freezing the accounts, I had damaged the company's reputation. He was painting himself as the victim of a vindictive wife who was destroying his livelihood. He wanted the house. He wanted the company. And he wanted me to pay him for the privilege of being cheated on. I picked up the phone and called Talia. He filed. I said, "He is accusing me of sabotage." "Standard bully tactic," Talia said, her voice crisp and unbothered. "He is trying to overwhelm you. He wants you to panic and trade the house for your freedom. But he made a mistake. By claiming financial damages to the company, he has opened the door for us to demand full financial discovery of the company's books to prove the value of said damages. He thinks he can hide the records." I said, "He thinks because he revoked my admin access, I cannot see what he is doing. Then let us remind him that the law has higher access privileges than a system administrator." Talia replied, "I am filing a motion for expedited discovery. We are not just asking for bank statements. Josephine, we are asking for a forensic image of the company servers. We want email logs, chat histories, edit timestamps, and deleted items." The legal machinery began to turn. 2 days later, the court granted our request. It was a terrifyingly invasive order. It required Evan to turn over every digital footprint he had created in the last 12 months. Evan retaliated the only way he knew how. He went to the court of public opinion within the office. I started receiving text messages from former employees, people who had been too afraid to speak to me before. "Joe, are you okay? Evan told the managers in the morning briefing that you are in a rehab facility. He said you had a breakdown at the party, and you are a danger to the staff. Marissa is telling clients that you mishandled the accounts and they had to remove you to save the audit. He was gaslighting the entire company. He was turning my competence into insanity. He was using the stigma of mental health to delegitimize my authority. If the staff believed I was crazy, they would not listen to me when I warned them about the embezzlement. I could have stayed at home and cried. I could have let the shame eat me alive, but I remembered the concrete. I am the foundation. Foundations do not crumble just because someone throws mud at them. I put on my sharpest blazer, a navy blue structured piece that made me feel like armor. I drove to the city. I did not go to the office. I knew security would stop me. Instead, I went to the coffee shop directly across the street, the one where the senior managers always went for their 10 o'clock caffeine fix. I sat at a window seat, opened my laptop, and waited. At 10:15, the glass doors of the office building opened. 3 of my department heads walked out. Sarah, the VP of Sales, Mark, the head of IT, and Derek. They crossed the street, talking in hushed tones. When they walked into the coffee shop, the bell above the door jingled. They looked up. They saw me. I was not in a hospital gown. I was not screaming at the baristas. I was sitting calmly, reviewing a spreadsheet, looking perfectly manicured and dangerously sane. Sarah froze. Mark looked like he wanted to run. "Good morning," I said. My voice was level, projecting just enough to be heard over the hiss of the espresso machine. "The coffee is better here than the break room. Is it not?" They stood there, awkward and guilty. "Joe," Sarah stammered, We heard you were unwell. Evan says a lot of things." I said, closing my laptop slowly. "Evan also says that moving our clients to NMC Solutions is a simple administrative change, but we all know that is a lie. Do we not?" Mark, the IT head, went pale. He knew about the new entity. He had probably been forced to set up the domain. "I am not here to make a scene." I continued, gesturing to the empty chairs at my table. "I am here to give you a choice. Sit down." They looked at each other. Curiosity and fear warred in their eyes. Derek sat down first, then Sarah, then Mark. "I am going to keep this brief," I said, leaning in. "Evan is looting the company. He is transferring assets to a new entity to sell the business to Apex Capital. If he succeeds, Apex will fire all of you within 90 days. That is their playbook. You know it. He promised us equity in the new structure." Mark whispered, "He promised me till death do us part." I countered cold and sharp. "How much is his promise worth to you now?" I slid a folder across the table. It contained the proof of the NMC Solutions registration and the unauthorized wire transfers to Marissa's shell company. "This is embezzlement. I said, if you help him hide it, if you sign those new contracts, if you alter the logs, you are not just employees anymore. You are accessories to a felony. When the forensic accountants come, and they are coming, your names will be on the audit trail. Sarah looked at the bank transfer records. Her hand flew to her mouth. He told us that money was for a retainer with a branding agency. The agency is Marissa's apartment. I said, look at the address. The silence at the table was heavy. I could see the shift in their eyes. They were not loyal to Evan. They were loyal to their mortgages, their children's tuitions, their careers. And I had just shown them that sticking with Evan was the most dangerous career move they could make. I am not asking you to quit. I said, I am asking you to document. Keep copies of every request he makes. Do not delete anything. And when the receiver asks you questions, tell the truth. I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. Protect yourselves, because he will not. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving them staring at the papers. I did not look back. The pressure worked. By the afternoon, the cracks in Evan's fortress began to widen. My phone buzzed with an alert from Talia. We got the discovery dump. The IT guy must have panicked after he saw you. He gave us everything, even the metadata. I drove to Talia's office immediately. Her team was already sifting through the terabytes of data. We found it, Talia said as I walked in. She pointed to a large monitor on the wall. The smoking gun. On the screen was a digital contract. It was the service agreement for one of our largest clients, the one Robert Vance had warned me about. Look at the modification history. Talia said, the document showed a series of edits. The original contract was with Northline Meridian. Then, there was an edit made 3 days ago, changing the vendor name to NMC Solutions and backdating the effective date to January 1st. Changing a contract is not illegal if both parties agree. I said, true, Talia said, but look at the user who made the edit. The system log showed the user M_Vale. Marissa, now look at this. Talia clicked to the next slide. It was an email Marissa had sent to herself, likely to transfer the file to her personal laptop to work on it over the weekend. She had forgotten that our server appended a footer to every outgoing email. But she had also been careless with the body of the text. The email subject was Updated Contract for Apex Review. The body read Evan. I changed the vendor name on the Vance contract, so Apex sees the revenue in the new entity. I backdated it so it looks clean for the due diligence team. Make sure Robert signs the new version by Friday. She admitted to fraud in writing. I said, feeling a mix of disbelief and vindication. She explicitly stated she backdated a legal document to mislead a buyer. It is better than fraud, Talia said. It is conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Apex Capital is an SEC-regulated entity. Lying to them about the origin of revenue during a buyout is a federal crime. Marissa thought she was being efficient. She thought she was being the perfect partner, helping her man close the deal. In reality, she was an amateur playing with fire, and she had just burned the whole house down. She is not just a mistress, I said, staring at the screen. She is a liability. And Evan does not know she left this trail. He will know soon. Talia said, the temporary hearing is in 48 hours. We are going to walk into that courtroom and drop this on the judge's desk. We are going to show that the current management is not just incompetent, but criminal. He thinks he is going to win. I said, he sent me a text this morning. He offered me a settlement, $50,000, and I keep the car. He called it a generous final offer. He is delusional, Talia said. He is confident. I corrected. He thinks he has the board. He thinks he has the staff. He thinks I am just a scorned wife who is going to cry in front of the judge. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, in our office, Evan and Marissa were probably toasting with champagne, thinking they had outsmarted me. They were probably laughing about how easy it was to push me out. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt when a server crashed at 3 a.m. The panic was gone. The emotion was gone. There was only the code, the error, and the fix. I turned back to Talia. Prepare the motion for an emergency injunction. I said, I do not just want to stop the sale. I want to remove him. I want to trigger the bad actor clause. We will present it at the hearing, Talia said. But be prepared. He will bring everything he has. He will bring up the broken window. He will bring up your outburst at the party. He will try to make you look unhinged. Let him try. I said, he is bringing insults to a gunfight. I am bringing the ammunition. That night, I sat in my living room, the one Evan had tried to mortgage out from under me. I looked at the walls I had painted. I looked at the empty spot where his chair used to be. I realized then that I did not want him back. I did not want an apology. I did not even want his suffering. Not really. I wanted accuracy. The ledger of our marriage was unbalanced. He had taken everything: my trust, my work, my youth, my peace. He had marked it all as his profit. But he had forgotten to account for the audit. The hearing was in 2 days. He had his lawyer, his lies, and his mistress. But I had the truth. I had the logs. I had the forged signature. And I had the one thing he never thought I would use against him. I had the fact that for 10 years, I was the one who read the fine print. And the fine print was about to strangle him. The adrenaline that had fueled me for the last 72 hours finally evaporated the moment I closed the front door behind me. For days, I had been running on a cocktail of rage, caffeine, and legal strategy. I had been a general commanding an army, a detective hunting for clues, and a CEO fighting for her territory, but now, standing in the foyer of the house I had broken back into. The silence was not a trophy. It was a weight. It was 8 o'clock at night. The house was dark, save for the street lamp casting long, distorted shadows through the sheer curtains. I walked into the living room and turned on a single lamp. The light fell on the beige armchair where Evan used to sit every evening, nursing a scotch, scrolling through his phone while I cooked dinner. I stared at that empty chair, for the first time since he raised his glass at the party. The armor cracked. I did not just cry. I collapsed. I sank onto the rug, the rough wool scratching my palms, and I let out a sound that was less like a sob and more like a creature in pain. It was a guttural, ugly, heaving release. I cried for the marriage that was dead. I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who believed that love was a partnership, not a power struggle. I cried for the sheer, exhausting unfairness of having to fight for things I had already earned. I curled into a ball on the floor, the tears hot and humiliating on my face. As the waves of grief washed over me, memories began to surface, unbidden and sharp. I remembered the launch party for our first major product 5 years ago. Evan had frozen backstage, terrified that he would forget his speech. I had taken him by the shoulders, straightened his tie, and whispered the opening lines to him until he breathed again. Then, I pushed him into the spotlight and stood in the shadows, watching him charm the room. I remembered the time he insulted a key vendor during a heated negotiation. I had spent 3 days smoothing it over, sending gift baskets, writing apology emails, and renegotiating the terms so Evan would not lose face. He never thanked me. He just said, "I knew you would handle it." I looked at the ceiling. My vision blurred. When did I do this? I whispered to the empty room. When did I agree to be the invisible woman? I realized then that Evan did not steal the spotlight from me. I had handed it to him. I had done it out of love, out of a desire to protect him, out of a belief that his success was our success. I had made myself small so he could feel big. I had poured my concrete so he could build his skyscraper. And now, he was using that height to drop rocks on my head. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was alone in a house that was technically in default. I had burnt through $20,000 in legal fees in less than a week. The forensic accountants were charging $300 an hour. The private investigators were expensive. My personal savings were healthy, but they were not infinite. If this dragged on for months, I would be bankrupt before I even stepped into a courtroom. I was fighting a war on 2 fronts: the emotional devastation of a failed marriage and the financial terror of a hostile takeover. I pulled my knees to my chest, shivering. The house felt too big, too cold. Then, The doorbell rang. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was it Evan? Was it the police? Was it the hard money lender coming to seize the property? I wiped my face with my sleeve and stood up. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was my mother. She was standing on the porch, holding a large Tupperware container and a bag of groceries. She looked small under the yellow porch light, but her face was set in that grim, determined expression that I knew so well. I opened the door. "Mama," I said, my voice cracking. "You did not have to come." She did not say hello. She walked past me, marching straight into the kitchen. She set the container on the counter and started unpacking the grocery bag. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a bag of oranges. "You are not eating," she said, accusingly. "I can see your bones." "I am not hungry," I said, leaning against the doorframe, feeling fresh tears prick my eyes. She ignored me. She popped the lid off the Tupperware. The smell of her chicken stew filled the kitchen, a rich, savory scent of rosemary and slow-cooked broth that instantly transported me back to my childhood. She ladled a bowl and set it on the island. She put a spoon next to it. "Sit," she commanded. I sat. I picked up the spoon. My hand was shaking. My mother stood on the other side of the island, watching me. She did not tell me to be strong. She did not tell me that everything happens for a reason. She did not offer platitudes about how I was better off without him. "Eat," she said simply. "You cannot fight the devil on an empty stomach. We figure it out tomorrow. Tonight, you eat." I took a bite. The warmth of the soup spread through my chest, thawing the icy knot of anxiety that had been there for days. I looked at my mother, a woman who had buried a husband and raised 3 children on a minimum wage salary. She knew about survival. She knew that sometimes, survival is just eating a bowl of soup when you want to die. I finished the bowl. For the first time in days, I felt the ground under my feet. "Thank you," I whispered. "Go to sleep," she said, putting the lid back on the container. "I will lock up." I slept that night, a deep, dreamless sleep of the exhausted. The next morning, the sun was shining, but the air was crisp. I felt bruised, but functional. I was drinking coffee on the front porch when the mail carrier arrived. He handed me a stack of bills and circulars, but mixed in with the junk mail was a plain brown envelope. It had no return address. My name and address were printed on a label, not handwritten. I felt a prick of suspicion. In the corporate world, anonymous mail usually meant one of 2 things: a threat or a leak. I took the envelope inside and placed it on the kitchen table. I grabbed a letter opener. My hands were steady now. I slit the top open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper and a small, silver USB drive. I unfolded the paper. It was a photocopy of a transaction log, similar to the ones I had seen, but this one had handwritten notes in the margins. The note was short. "You are looking in the wrong place. Check the approval chain." I looked at the USB drive. It looked innocent enough, but I knew better than to plug an unknown drive into my laptop. It could be malware. It could be a trap set by Evan to accuse me of hacking. I called Talia. "I received a package," I said. "Anonymous, a USB drive and a note." "Do not plug it in," Talia said instantly. "Bring it to me. We will run it on an air-gapped machine. If it is a virus, we contain it. If it is evidence, we log the chain of custody." I drove to the office immediately. Talia's IT specialist, a quiet man named Kevin, took the drive with latex gloves. He plugged it into a laptop that was disconnected from the internet. We watched the screen. "No malware detected," Kevin said after a minute. "It contains a folder of PDFs and a few email archives." He opened the first file. It was an internal purchase order from Northline Meridian. The amount was $12,000. The vendor was V Consulting. "We already have this," I said, disappointed. "We know about the payments." "Look at the second page," Kevin said. He scrolled down. Every purchase order in our company required 2 signatures if it was over $5,000. Usually, it was the department head and the CFO. But on this document, The signatures were different. The first signature was Evan's. The second signature belonged to the VP of Finance, a man named Gary Thorne. But next to Gary's signature, there was a handwritten note in the comment box, approved per verbal instruction from CEO, documentation to follow. Kevin opened the next file. Another purchase order, $15,000. Again, Gary's signature. Again, the note, CEO directive, no invoice provided. Then, Kevin opened an email archive file. It was a thread between Evan and Gary, from Evan Caldwell to Gary Thorne. Subject urgent wire. Gary, I need you to push through the payment to V Consulting today. It is for the strategic rebranding project. From Gary Thorne to Evan Caldwell. Subject urgent wire. Evan, I still do not have a contract or a scope of work for this vendor. Compliance will flag this. I cannot sign off without documentation. From Evan Caldwell to Gary Thorne. Subject urgent wire. Just get it done. Gary, I will sign a waiver. Put it under miscellaneous project expenses. If you have a problem with my instructions, maybe we need to discuss your future at the firm. I gasped. He threatened him, Talia said, leaning closer to the screen. He coerced the finance officer to bypass internal controls. There is more, Kevin said. Look at this chat log. It was a screenshot of an internal instant message conversation between Evan and Marissa. Marissa Gary is asking questions again. Evan, I handled him. He is scared of losing his bonus. Marissa Good. Make sure he codes the hotel charges as Client Development Apex. If he codes it as travel, the auditors might check the room service bills. Evan Dunn. We are cleaning the books. By the time Josephine sees the quarterly report, it will just look like aggressive marketing spend. I sat back in the chair. This was not just theft. This was a conspiracy to falsify accounting records. And more importantly, it proved that there were people inside the company who were uncomfortable. Gary Thorne was documenting his objections. He was covering his own tracks because he knew what Evan was doing was wrong. Who sent this? I asked. Gary. It has to be, Talia said. Or someone close to him. These are screenshots from his terminal. She looked at the metadata of the files. Created yesterday at 6 p.m. This is fresh. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was warmth. For days. I had felt completely isolated. I thought the entire company had turned against me. I thought they were all sycophants worshipping Evan. But I was wrong. There were people inside those glass walls who were watching. People who knew the difference between right and wrong. People who remembered that I was the one who wrote the ethical guidelines for the company. Gary Thorne was a quiet man. He had 3 kids. He was risk-averse. He would never stand up to Evan in a public meeting. But he had found a way to fight. He had sent me the ammunition I needed. I am not alone, I said softly. No, Talia said, smiling grimly. You have a 5th column. Evan thinks he controls the staff because he signs the checks. He forgot that loyalty is earned, not bought, and coercion creates enemies. Can we use this? I asked. Absolutely, Talia said. This email thread proves that the business expenses were knowingly misclassified to hide the affair. It destroys his defense that the spending was legitimate and the threat to Gary. That is witness tampering if we push hard enough. I took the USB drive back from Kevin. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than its plastic shell suggested. It carried the weight of someone's career. Gary had risked everything to send this to me. I could not let him down. I left Talia's office as the sun was setting. The city lights were flickering on, a sea of white and gold against the darkening sky. I drove home. But the dread was gone. The fear of the empty house was gone. I pulled into the driveway and walked up the steps. I did not go inside immediately. I stood on the porch, leaning against the railing, looking out at the quiet suburban street. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. It smelled of impending rain and wet earth. For the last week, I had been reacting. I had been dodging Evan's punches, trying to patch the holes he was punching in my life. I had been playing defense, but looking at that USB drive in my hand, listening to the silence of the neighborhood. Something shifted. I was done crying. I was done questioning my worth. I was done wondering if I was just the background character in Evan's success story. I was the writer of this story. I always had been. I wrote the business plan. I wrote the code. I wrote the contracts. And now, I was going to write the ending. I looked at the dark windows of my house. It was not a tomb. It was a fortress. And tomorrow, at the hearing, I was going to lower the drawbridge and ride out to meet him. "Okay," I whispered to the night. "You want a show, Evan. You want to tell a story about how I am weak and crazy." I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. "Then let's see how you handle a plot twist." I turned and walked into the house. Locking the door behind me, I had work to do. The court hearing was in 24 hours, and I had a narrative to dismantle. The war room in Talia's office had transformed. It was no longer a place of frantic discovery. It was a command center for a coordinated assault. We had spent the last 48 hours mapping out a strategy that was less like a legal defense and more like a surgical amputation. Talia stood before the whiteboard, which was divided into two distinct columns. On the left, written in red marker, was the word court. On the right, written in blue, was the word boardroom. "This is a pincer movement," Talia said, tapping the board with the cap of her marker. "If we only attack him in divorce court, he uses company funds to drag it out for years. If we only attack him in the boardroom, he claims it is a personal vendetta and sues you for interference. We have to hit him in both places. Simultaneously." I nodded, looking at the timeline we had constructed. It was tight. It was dangerous. But it was the only way to end this. "The divorce hearing is set for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." I said, "That is where we secure the assets and expose the loan fraud. The shareholder meeting is scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon." "Exactly." Talia said, "We cripple his financial standing in the morning. By the time he walks into the boardroom in the afternoon, he will be bleeding. He will be distracted, angry, and careless. That is when we trigger the removal clause. But to make the removal stick, I needed more than just the forensic report. I needed the market to speak. Evan's entire defense rested on the idea that he was the essential genius behind Northline Meridian, and I was just administrative overhead. I had to prove that without the overhead. The genius had nothing to sell. I spent the afternoon on the phone. I did not call the general customer service lines. I called the personal cell phones of our top 10 clients' numbers I had stored in my memory from years of late-night crisis management. I called Marcus at Global Freight. I called Sarah at Delta Logistics. I called the founders of the startups we had nurtured from seed stage. My pitch was simple. I did not badmouth Evan. I did not mention the affair. I simply asked them a question. If the operational leadership of Northline Meridian changes, and the service guarantees I personally wrote for you are voided, will you stay? The answers were immediate and validating. "Joe, the only reason I sleep at night is because I know you audit the routing algorithms." Marcus told me, "Evan is a great guy to have a drink with, but I do not trust him with my supply chain. If you go, we trigger the exit clause. I need that in writing." "Marcus," I said, not as a threat, but as a statement of fact regarding your vendor criteria. By 5 o'clock, I had 7 signed affidavits in my inbox. They all said the same thing in different legal variations. Our contract is predicated on the current operational standards maintained by Josephine Hernandez. These letters were not just compliments. They were leverage. They proved that if Evan fired me, he would devalue the company by 40% overnight. While I was securing the external front, Talia received the final report from the forensic auditor. It was bound in a thick black cover. "It is done," Talia said, handing it to me. "We have him on 14 counts of fiduciary breach. The unauthorized wire transfers to Marissa, the coerced approval of false invoices, the forgery of the loan documents, the misclassification of personal travel expenses." She flipped to page 20. "And this," she said, "this is the clincher. The auditor found that Evan used company funds to pay the retainer for his personal divorce attorney. He coded it as legal intellectual property defense." I stared at the line item. He was using my money, our company's money, to pay the lawyer who was trying to take my house. The audacity was breathtaking. He is funding his war chest by looting the treasury. I said, "It is a direct violation of the corporate bylaws." Talia said, "It is theft, and it exposes the company to tax fraud liability. If the IRS sees this, they will audit everything. As a shareholder, you have a legal duty to stop him to protect the entity. We had the evidence. Now we needed the venue." I sat down at Talia's computer and drafted the formal notice. I did not write it as a wife. I wrote it as the manager of Northline Holdings, LLC, to Evan Caldwell. CEO, Northline Meridian Consulting. From Josephine Hernandez. Manager, Northline Holdings, LLC, Re-Emergency Shareholder Meeting, pursuant to Article 6, Section 2 of the Operating Agreement. I am hereby convening an emergency meeting of the Board of Members to discuss urgent matters regarding financial compliance and executive conduct. Attendance is mandatory. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Evan. I let it go to voicemail. He texted, "What is this? We are in the middle of due diligence with Apex. Stop playing games. Josephine, you are going to scare the buyer." I did not reply. He called again, then a third time. Finally, I answered. I made sure my voice sounded tired. I made sure I sounded like a woman who was beaten down by the process. "What do you want?" "Evan," I asked, keeping my tone flat and weary. "You cannot call a board meeting right now," he snapped. "I have the Apex team coming in tomorrow afternoon to sign the letter of intent. If you pull a stunt like this, you will tank the deal. I am tired." "Evan," I said, exhaling slowly into the receiver, "I am tired of the lawyers. I am tired of fighting for a house you obviously do not want me in. Maybe you are right. Maybe I should just take the settlement and go." There was a pause on the line. I could practically hear his ego inflating. He thought I was cracking. He thought the pressure of the lawsuit and the public humiliation had finally broken me. "Now you are making sense," Evan said, his voice shifting from angry to patronizing. "Look, Joe, I do not want to hurt you. I just want to move on. The Apex deal is good for both of us. It is $10 million. You walk away with $5 million. Why fight that $5 million? I repeated. "And you promise the audit won't bring up any issues?" "I do not want to be liable for anything you did with the books. The books are fine," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I have handled everything. Marissa fixed the categorization issues. Apex is happy. All they need is your signature on the waiver." "So Marissa fixed the books," I said, ensuring I got the verbal confirmation, "and Apex is ready to sign tomorrow." "Yes," Evan said. "They are coming at 4. Let us cancel this shareholder meeting nonsense. We will meet at the office at 2. You sign the waiver. We sign with Apex at 4, and you get your check. Everyone wins." "Okay." I lied. "I will bring the waiver to the meeting at 2. "Good girl," he said. "Good girl." I hung up the phone. My hand was not shaking. It was steady as a rock. He took the bait. I told Talia, "He thinks I am coming to surrender. He thinks the meeting at 2 is just a formality to sign the deal. He is going to walk into a slaughter." Talia said. But Evan was not the only one making mistakes. Later that evening, while we were preparing the binders for court, I received a notification from the archiving system we had set up to monitor the company servers. It was an email from Marissa to her personal attorney. She had sent it from her work email, a rookie mistake born of panic. Subject indemnification clause. Body. "I need you to review my employment contract again. If Evan gets sued for the financial irregularities, am I covered?" He instructed me to make those edits to the vendor list. But I do not have a written order. I am worried he is going to hang me out to dry if the audit goes bad. I read the email twice. Marissa was turning. She smelled the smoke. She realized that Evan was reckless. And she knew that when men like Evan fall, they look for someone to push in front of the bus. She was trying to build a parachute for herself. But by sending that email, she had admitted 2 things. First, that she knew there were financial irregularities, and second, that she had participated in them. She had just destroyed her own innocent bystander defense. She is terrified. I said to Talia, "She knows she crossed the line. We will use that." Talia said, "When we corner Evan in the meeting, we will read this email. We will show him that his loyal partner is already looking for a way to testify against him." It was 11 o'clock at night when I finally went home. I walked into the quiet house. My suit for tomorrow, a sharp, white-tailored suit that looked like ice, was hanging on the bedroom door. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the drawer of my nightstand. I pulled out a small, framed photograph that I had hidden away weeks ago. It was a Polaroid, taken 7 years ago. It was taken in our first office, the garage. I was sitting on a milk crate, wearing a baggy sweatshirt, my hair in a messy bun. I was pointing at a whiteboard covered in code. Evan was standing next to me, looking at the board with a mixture of confusion and awe. I looked at the girl in the photo. She looked tired. She looked unglamorous, but she looked powerful. She was the one holding the marker. She was the one explaining the logic. For a long time, I had looked at that photo and felt sad. I thought it showed how much I had loved him, how much I had given him, but tonight, looking at it under the lamplight, I saw something else. I saw that I had never been the sidekick. I had been the engine. Evan was just the hood ornament. Shiny, yes. Attractive, yes. But without the engine, a car is just a sculpture that goes nowhere. I ran my thumb over the face of the girl in the photo. "You did not lose yourself." I whispered to her, "You just forgot that you were driving." I put the photo back in the drawer. I did not need it anymore. I did not need memories of the past. I needed to focus on the future I was about to reclaim. I checked my phone one last time. Calendar for February 10th, 9 o'clock a.m. Family Court, District 4. Hearing for temporary orders and dissipation of assets. 2 o'clock p.m. Northline Meridian Headquarters. Emergency shareholder meeting. It was a schedule designed for maximum impact, a double-header, a relentless 1-2 punch that would not give him time to breathe, let alone think. Evan believed he was walking into a victory lap tomorrow. He believed he would strip me of my house in the morning and buy me out of my company in the afternoon. He believed the world worked the way he wanted it to because it always had. He did not know that I had spent the last week rewriting the laws of his world. I turned off the lamp and lay down in the dark. I closed my eyes and visualized the day. I visualized the look on the judge's face when Talia presented the loan documents. I visualized the look on Evan's face when I walked into the boardroom, not with a waiver, but with a removal order. I visualized the concrete cracking and the skyscraper coming down. I slept for 6 hours. When I woke up, the sun was rising red and angry over the horizon. I showered. I dressed in the white suit. I applied my makeup with precision. I did not look like a woman who had been crying on the floor 2 nights ago. I looked like a blade. I walked downstairs, grabbed my briefcase, and paused at the front door. I looked at the spot where the lock used to be the lock Evan had changed to keep me out. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold, bracing. Game day, I said. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove toward the city. I was not going to the courthouse to ask for fairness. I was going to the courthouse to deliver consequences. And then, I was going to the office to take back what was mine. The trap was set. The evidence was sealed, and the architect was coming home. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the air was thick with the tension of unsaid things. I sat next to Talia at the mahogany table, my back straight against the hard wooden chair. I wore the white suit I had chosen the night before. It was pristine, sharp, and unapologetic. Across the aisle, Evan sat with his lawyer. He looked rested. He looked confident. He wore a navy suit that I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. When the judge called our case, Evan's lawyer stood up. He painted a picture of a tragic, unavoidable breakdown. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "My client, Mr. Caldwell, is simply trying to navigate a difficult separation. His wife, Miss Hernandez, has unfortunately reacted with volatility. She broke into the marital home. She destroyed property. She has been erratic in her professional conduct. We are asking for an order to sell the marital residence immediately to divide the assets. As my client believes, Hernandez is not in a financial position to maintain the property. Evan nodded solemnly, playing the part of the long-suffering husband to perfection. When the judge asked him a question, he stood up. Buttoning his jacket, "I just want to be fair, Your Honor," Evan said, his voice smooth. "Josephine has always been intense, controlling. Lately, she has become cold, impossible to work with. I had to change the locks for her own safety as much as mine. I just want to liquidate the assets and move on." I felt Talia's hand touch my arm gently under the table. "It was the signal, Your Honor," Talia said. Standing up, she did not use adjectives. She used paper. "Mr. Caldwell claims he wants fairness. Yet, we have evidence that suggests his definition of fairness involves grand larceny and fraud." Talia walked to the bench and handed the judge the thick black binder, the forensic report we had finalized only hours ago. "We are submitting into evidence a forensic accounting of the marital and business assets." Talia continued, "Mr. Caldwell claims my client cannot maintain the home. However, the records show that Mr. Caldwell has dissipated over $52,000 of marital funds in the last 6 weeks alone on unauthorized wire transfers, luxury hotels, and jewelry for a third party." Evan shifted in his seat. The confidence flickered. "Furthermore," Talia said, pulling out a second document, "Mr. Caldwell is requesting the sale of the home, likely because he is desperate to cover the $500,000 hard money loan he took out against the property 3 weeks ago. A loan he secured by forging Ms. Hernandez's signature." The courtroom went silent. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, stopped flipping through the binder. She looked up, her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the law. "Did you take out a secondary lien on the marital home without your wife's consent?" Evan stood up. He was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead. "Your Honor, it was a bridge loan for the business." Evan stammered. "I intended to pay it back as soon as—" "Did you sign her name?" the judge interrupted. As CEO, I have implied authority to—" "Did you sign her name?" the judge repeated, her voice like a hammer. "Yes," Evan whispered. "And regarding the locks," the judge continued, looking at the police report I had filed, "you evicted a 50% owner of the property without a court order, and you are currently residing elsewhere." "I am staying at a hotel," Evan admitted, "on the company credit card." "I assume," the judge noted dryly, glancing at the forensic report. Evan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at his lawyer, but the lawyer was looking down at his papers, distancing himself from the disaster unfolding next to him for the first time. Evan looked small. The charisma that had charmed investors and clients evaporated under the harsh light of judicial scrutiny. "The court is issuing a temporary order," the judge declared. "Ms. Hernandez is granted exclusive use and possession of the marital residence. Mr. Caldwell is restrained from entering the property or coming within 100 yards of Ms. Hernandez. Furthermore, all financial assets of the marriage and the business are frozen, pending a full audit. Mr. Caldwell, you are prohibited from selling, transferring, or encumbering any assets. If you spend $1 that is not for basic living necessities, I will hold you in contempt." Evans slumped into his chair. He had walked in expecting to force a sale. He walked out with a restraining order and a frozen bank account. But the morning was just the warm-up. I left the courthouse without looking at him. I drove straight to the office. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When I walked into the lobby of Northline Meridian, the air felt different. The security guard, Paul, saw me coming. He did not stop me this time. He pressed the button to unlock the turnstile and nodded. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hernandez," he said. "Good afternoon, Paul," I replied. I took the elevator to the executive floor. My heart was beating a steady, powerful rhythm. I was not afraid. I was ready. I walked toward the glass-walled conference room. Inside, Evan and Marissa were already sitting at the head of the table. They were looking at a laptop, whispering. When I opened the door, they both looked up. Evan looked terrible. His tie was loosened. His eyes wild. He thought I was coming to sign the waiver for the Apex Capital deal. He thought he could still salvage the sale if I just surrendered. Marissa looked perfect, as always, but there was a tightness around her mouth that betrayed her anxiety. "You are late," Evan snapped, trying to regain the dominance he had lost in court. "Do you have the waiver? The Apex team is coming in 2 hours." I placed my briefcase on the table. I did not sit down. "There will be no meeting with Apex," I said calmly, "and I did not bring a waiver." I opened the briefcase and took out the stack of documents. I slid one copy to Evan and one copy to Marissa. "What is this?" Marissa asked, picking up the paper. "This represents a formal convening of the Board of Members of Northline Holdings, LLC. I announced, I am calling this meeting to order. You cannot do that." Evan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "I am the CEO. I run this meeting. Not anymore," I said. I turned to the last page of the document I had given them. "Pursuant to Addendum 4C of our operating agreement, also known as the Bad Actor Clause," I read aloud, my voice filling the room. "Any managing member found to have engaged in embezzlement or material breach of fiduciary duty shall have their voting rights and executive authority immediately suspended." Evan's face went white. He knew that clause. He remembered signing it. "You have no proof," he hissed. "I have the forensic audit that was accepted into evidence by a judge 3 hours ago." I said, "I have the transaction logs of the $52,000 you wired to V Consulting. I have the sworn affidavit from Gary Thorne in finance regarding your coercion to falsify invoices. And I have the email you sent to Marissa calling me just the concrete." I looked at him. "I may be just the concrete, Evan, but the concrete is what traps you when the building falls." Evan looked at the papers. He looked at the proof of his theft, laid out in black and white. He realized, finally, that he was not the smartest person in the room. He was just the loudest. "Marissa," Evan said, turning to her, desperation in his voice. Tell her the consulting fees were legitimate. Tell her you did the work." I turned my gaze to Marissa. She was staring at the email printout, the one where she asked her lawyer about indemnification. "Marissa," I said softly, "if you speak up for him now, you become a co-conspirator. I have already filed a report with the SEC regarding the backdated contracts you edited. If you claim that money was for real work, you go down for fraud too, but if you walk away, maybe the authorities will believe you were just a pawn." Marissa looked at Evan. Then she looked at the audit report. She calculated the odds. She was a woman who survived on calculation. After all, she stood up. She picked up her purse. "Marissa," Evan asked, his voice trembling. "Where are you going? I need to call my lawyer," Marissa said. She did not look at him. She did not touch his arm. She walked to the door. "Marissa," Evan shouted. She stopped at the doorway and looked back at me. There was no triumph in her eyes anymore. Only fear. "I resign," she said, and then she walked out, the click of her heels fading down the hallway. Evan was alone. He sat in the empty conference room, surrounded by glass, stripped of his mistress, his money, and his title. I looked at the other managers who had gathered outside the glass walls. Derek, Sarah, Mark, they were watching. They were witnesses to the transfer of power. "The board accepts your suspension." "Evan," I said, "security will escort you out. You are not to remove any company property. Your laptop stays. Your phone stays." Evan looked up at me. His eyes were red. "You cannot do this," he whispered. "I built this. I am the face of this company." "You were the face." I corrected him. "I was the brain, and the brain has decided to cut off the diseased limb." Paul, the security guard, entered the room. He looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. "Mr. Caldwell," Paul said firmly. "This way, please." Evan stood up. He looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just a profound, shattering confusion. He still could not understand how the woman he had underestimated for 10 years had just dismantled his entire life in a single day. He walked out. He left with nothing but the suit on his back. The final twist came 3 days later. Evan's lawyer called Talia. They wanted to negotiate the final divorce decree. Evan was willing to walk away from the company, but he wanted his share of the house equity. He thought that even with the loan, there was still value left. We met in Talia's office. Evan was there, looking disheveled, defeated. The house is appraised at $1.2 million. Evan's lawyer said, even with the original mortgage and the $500,000 hard money loan Evan took out, there is still equity. We want his half. I slid a piece of paper across the table. You forgot the penalties. I said, what penalties? Evan asked. The hard money loan you signed. I explained, it has a default clause. Because of the restraining order and the asset freeze, the loan went into technical default yesterday. The penalty interest rate kicked in. It is now 24%, plus the legal fees from the lender. I pointed to the bottom line. Furthermore, because you used the loan proceeds for non-marital purposes, which we proved in court, the judge has allocated the entire debt to you. You owe the lender $500,000 plus penalties. I do not. Evan stared at the numbers. So, I continued, if we sell the house today, after paying off the first mortgage and your hard money loan, the net proceeds are zero, actually, less than zero. You would owe money at closing. Evan buried his face in his hands. But, I said, leaning forward, I have a solution. I have spoken to the lender. I have agreed to refinance the hard money loan into my own name, assuming the debt. Provided you sign a quitclaim deed transferring the house solely to me, I keep the house. You walk away from the debt. It was the only way he could escape bankruptcy. I was offering him a life raft, but the price was his claim to the last thing we owned together. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He picked up the pen. He signed. He left the office with nothing. No company, no wife, no mistress, no house, and with the SEC investigation pending regarding the Apex deal, he likely had no future. I drove home that evening. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over Stonebridge Ridge. I walked up the steps to the white timber house. It was mine now. Legally, financially, completely mine. I walked into the home office. I took the old Northline Meridian nameplate out of the box, the one Evan had thrown away because he wanted a more modern logo. I hung it on the wall behind my desk. I sat down in the leather chair. The house was quiet, but it was not lonely. It was peaceful. I thought about the last 10 years. I thought about the woman who had stayed in the shadows, who had made herself small, who had been just the concrete. I spun the chair around to look out the window at the garden I had planted. I was not a victim. I was not a divorcee. I was the CEO. I picked up a pen and opened a fresh notebook. There was a company to rebuild. There were clients to reassure. There was a life to live. Evan had tried to destroy me. He had tried to take everything, but he forgot the most important rule of construction. You can tear down the walls. You can strip the fixtures. You can even burn the roof, but you can never break the foundation. I smiled, feeling the weight of the pen in my hand. I was Josephine Hernandez, and I had just finished my masterpiece. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from and share your thoughts on Josephine's victory. Don't forget to subscribe to the Olivia Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.